boys and girls, and welcome to Storytime with Avant-garde Books. I'm Sherry Hardy. I hope you're having a great day. Today I'm going to do part two, the final part of a book called The Trail of Tears. This book was written by Joseph Bruchac and it was illustrated by Diana Magnuson. If you have a copy, feel free to read along with me, but if you don't, it's quite okay. Just make sure you're in a very comfortable place and you're relaxed so that you can listen to The Trail of Tears. John Ross and the official representatives of the Cherokees said this treaty was illegal. Former President John Quincy Adams said that the treaty brings disgrace upon the country. However, the United States Senate approved it by a single vote. A smile of victory on his face, President Andrew Jackson signed the Treaty of the New Echota into law. The removal of the Cherokees would go into effect in 1838. The Cherokees were about to walk the Trail of Tears, the place where the people cried. Only 20 Cherokee men signed the Treaty of New Echota. John Ross went to Washington with a petition signed by 16,000 Cherokee people who opposed the treaty. The Western Cherokees sent another petition to Congress signed by Sequoyah and the other Western Cherokee leaders. Many white Americans supported the Cherokees as well. They wrote articles in newspapers and sent letters and petitions. The letters and petitions and pleas were all ignored. Some Cherokees went west before the deadline of May 1838. The men who signed the treaty led small groups of Cherokee settlers to what is now the state of Oklahoma. They picked out the best home sites for themselves. Martin Van Buren was now President of the United States. He feared that the remaining Cherokees would try to fight. He sent General John Ellis Wool to take away their weapons, but the general found himself protecting the Cherokee people instead. Dishonest white men were flocking to Cherokee land to cheat the Cherokees and steal from them. These white men, Wool said, were like vultures ready to pounce. General Wool resigned in protest. Georgia threatened to go to war against the Cherokee people if the Cherokees were not removed. President Van Buren did not wish to anger the South. He sent General Wilfield Scott to take Wool's place. Scott's army rounded up the Cherokees. Almost all the Cherokee people were taken captive. They were locked up in a stockade forts. They had to leave behind everything except for clothes they wore and what little they could carry. Groups of white men following the soldiers quickly took over the Cherokee homes. Families were separated as people were herded into the camps. Children cried out for their parents. Frantic mothers looked for their little ones. Food and water were scarce. People began to get sick. Many died while being held captive. There were prisoners whose only crime was that they were Cherokees and white people wanted their land. Several routes were used to take the Cherokees west. One was by water. People were loaded onto large flatboats guarded by troops. On the crowded boats, more people became sick. Some fell into the water and drowned. The other routes were mostly by land. They were longer but safer. When Chief John Ross returned again from Washington, he was upset by what he saw. In the crowded camps, there was no bedding and no cooking utensils. There was no protection from the burning summer sun or the rains. Some people were nearly naked. Cherokees were dying in great numbers. Chief John Ross made a proposal to General Scott. Instead of treating the Cherokees like criminals and forcing them to move, he asked Scott to let the Cherokee people arrange their own travel west. No other group of Indians had been allowed to do this. They had all been escorted to Indian territory by the United States troops, but Scott was upset by what had happened to the Cherokees. To everyone's surprise, he agreed. Ex-President Andrew Jackson was enraged. He wrote an angry letter to the United States Attorney General in protest. However, John Ross's plan was allowed to go on. Each Cherokee was given an allowance of $65.88. This would cover the cost of wagons, horses, and oxen, bedding, food, soap, and clothing. They would also have to pay to use the turnpikes, private roads whose owners demanded money for their use. The Cherokees divided into parties. They would follow the long land route. They hoped to travel 15 miles each day. That way, they would make the 1,200 mile trip in 80 days. Because of the heat, the start was delayed. The first group left on October 1st, 1838. The last group departed on November 7th. They had months of travel ahead of them. The Cherokee people had been through a lot, but their troubles were not yet over. They feared that the roll of thunder and the black cloud at the start of their journey were bad omens. Those fears turned out to be true. White men followed the wagon trains, trying to steal from them. Cherokees were charged more than anyone else for using roads and ferries. Many were still sick from living in camps. Wagons broke down, horses and oxen died. Winter weather came early. Quaddy, the wife of John Ross, was very ill, but when she saw a sick child shivering by the road, she gave the child her blanket. On February 1st, 1839, John Ross paused to bury Quaddy near Little Rock, Arkansas. There were many such deaths. The legend of the Cherokee Rose grew from the Trail of Tears. It is said that each drop of blood that fell from the Cherokees turned into a stone rose. The red stone crystals can still be found along the Arkansas River. In 1968, the Cherokee Rose was made the state stone of Oklahoma. No one knows how many died during the removal. Some say it was 4,000 or more. It is no wonder that the Cherokees can still call this terrible experience Nunanatshunyi, the place where they cried, the Trail of Tears. The last Cherokee party arrived in Indian Territory on March the 25th, 1839. Their hard journey had taken 139 days. The Trail of Tears was over, but the long road toward healing people's wounds had just begun. At the end of the trail, when the Cherokees arrived in Indian Territory, they found little to welcome them. Nearby tribes were suffering from smallpox. Land given to the Cherokees was already occupied by others. Supplies promised by the United States government did not arrive. The Eastern Cherokee people, led by John Ross, wanted to keep their government. The Western Cherokees, who had moved to Indian Territory long before the Trail of Tears, did not want to be governed by newcomers. Many blamed their suffering on those who had signed the Treaty of the New Echota. On June 22, 1839, some of the men who signed the treaty were killed. John Ross, Sequoyah, and other Cherokee leaders worked to restore calm to their divided nation. Councils were held. A single Cherokee Nation was created, uniting old settlers and new immigrants. For almost 2 decades, the Cherokee Nation prospered. A capital was established with stores, a hotel, and a brick Supreme Court building. A newspaper, the Cherokee Advocate, was founded. By 1856, there were 21 Cherokee elementary and secondary schools for both men and women. Latin, algebra, botany, grammar, and geography were among the subjects all Cherokee students were required to take. The Cherokee Nation in Indian Territory had become a model of success. The Cherokees today. The Cherokee Nation still survives today. In fact, 2 Cherokee Nations exist. One is in Oklahoma, the other one is in the old Cherokee homelands of North Carolina. Despite the efforts of the United States Army, not all Cherokees went west. Some hid from the Army in wooded areas. This was especially true in the rugged Great Smoky Mountains of western North Carolina. Others escaped from the camps. Troops were sent to recapture them, but some Cherokees resisted. 2 white soldiers were killed. One of the Cherokees, an old man named Tasali, was sentenced to death after he and his two sons killed a soldier trying to capture them. He was killed by a firing squad of his own people. They knew that they would be shot if they didn't obey. Tasali showed such courage that he became a folk hero. In all, over 1,000 Cherokees stayed in the mountains of North Carolina. Eventually, the United States government gave them permission to remain on a small reservation. Today, there are over 10,000 members in the Eastern Band of Cherokee in North Carolina. Each year, a pageant called Unto These Hills, based on the Trail of Tears and the story of Tasali, is performed in Cherokee, North Carolina. In Oklahoma, the Cherokees survived as well. They did so in spite of hardships of the Trail of Tears. The Western Cherokees of Oklahoma now number over 80,000. They have a thriving tribal government, schools for Cherokee children, and businesses that employ Cherokee people. Lessons can be learned from the bitter journey called the Trail of Tears. One is that when promises are broken, many people suffer. There is another lesson, however, to be learned from the place where the people cried. It is a lesson of hope. The Cherokees showed us the importance of courage and determination. Their survival is the survival of all that is the best in the human spirit. And boys and girls, that is the end of this story. And I wanted to give you the copyright date of this. Wow, this book was written in 1999, so we need to get an update on the Cherokee Nation in the United States. Well, boys and girls, that historical story was The Trail of Tears, written by Joseph Bruchac and illustrated by Diana Magnuson. I hope you learned something. There were some great lessons there. Boys and girls, have a beautiful day, and don't forget to subscribe to our educational YouTube channel. Take care.